So the one thing I want to talk about today is the number one Google ranking factor that matters more than anything else for SEO. And so there are hundreds of Google ranking factors, and they are not all created equal. Some are weighted much heavier than others. And there's one factor that makes a massive difference when it comes to not only ranking in the short term, but also ranking in the long term and maintaining those rankings, along with being able to weather all of these algorithmic storms that seem to come pretty frequently from Google. So a couple real life examples here. Let me show you something real quickly. So I'm going to minimize out of here and show you. So I saw this pop up on Twitter, and this is from SERP Alert here. And I don't know if I actually follow them or not, but I just saw it pop up on my feed. And, I saw that The Verge is doing something really interesting. They have this article that is clearly kind of poking fun at Google and kind of, making a mockery of them, which is definitely a dangerous thing to do. You don't want to really poke the bear too much. But I want to show you this example and show you for a few reasons. Number one, clearly, they're optimizing for best printer 2024, and it's clearly working, right? I mean, they're here ranking, they're where they should be. And the reason why they're able to rank so incredibly well is this one factor I'll be telling you about in a second. But of course, there's a lot of other variables that lead up to them ranking, right? It's not just one simple variable, but this one variable is what makes the huge difference. Now, you can go ahead and look at this yourself. It's pretty funny. It's kind of poking fun at Google, and then basically they inject a bunch of content from Google Gemini, and so it's kind of funny, okay? Pretty funny. And they've also got, some UGC here as well. They've got some comments. They've got some stuff going here. So this just adds more uniqueness, more originality, more UGC, which is all stuff that Google is really loving recently when it comes to Reddit content and just UGC in general, all right? Now, if you run this through the AI detector, you're not going to be surprised that when we look at this, the only AI content that pops up is, of course, the Google Gemini content that they slapped in here intentionally. They did this on purpose. Okay, so but when you look at the majority of this content, it is actually very original. It is actually very unique. Plus, this doesn't even consider all of the comments, right? If we go into here and we look at their actual comment section, they've got quite a lot, 86 comments, all with, user generated content, and it's pretty extensive. So this all adds meat to their page, okay? It may not be weighted the same way as the body of the content, but it certainly is adding some weight, some depth to the content that you couldn't really replicate in a traditional article format. So believe it or not, this is actually very original content, although they're just having some fun with it. Now, let's talk about what kind of the reason why The Verge can rank so easily, okay? They published this 7 days ago, and they're ranking number one, right? And so how is that even possible? How can they rank so fast, right? And there's really only one factor that makes a difference, but I have to kind of lead into this factor for it to make sense, all right? So let's begin with how you actually rank in Google, all right? So number one, your site needs to be crawlable. So if Google can't crawl your site, then it's not possible to be indexed. And to rank, your page has to actually be indexed in Google. And so I know this is like SEO 101, but a lot of people don't talk about, they're like, oh, these are the huge ranking factors. Well, none of the other ranking factors matter if you can't get crawled and indexed. This is like by far the most important ranking factors because it's the beginning stages of actually performing well in Google, okay? So we need to be crawlable. We need to be indexable. And if you're wondering if you're just like want a quick check to see if you are, like you can just go to any website, and if you download the detailed Chrome extension, you can just click on this. And what you want to see is in this robots tag section that either it says index follow or it doesn't say anything at all. It being blank is perfectly fine. It does not need to say index follow. Google will crawl it and likely index it anyway, okay? You just wanna make sure that you don't see no index. That's what we don't wanna see, all right? And then you'd also go and look at the robots.txt file, and you can see, I have some fun. I block a lot of bots because I don't want them stealing my content, but that doesn't really stop them anyway, right? So that's just another situation. But you just want to make sure that in this disallow section that you're not blocking your actual website. Okay, it's very, very important. All right, so once you've got that squared away, it's pretty straightforward. We're crawling, we're indexing. Google's going to do this automatically. Yes, you can submit your sitemap into Google Search Console and do all that stuff, but at the end of the day, Google's going to likely crawl and index your site. And if it doesn't, then that's another issue, which likely it actually correlates really well to the main thing I'm talking about here today. Now, once we're crawled and we're indexed, now we're in the ranking equation, right? So this puts us basically into a pool, right? Just imagine you're going into a pool of millions and millions and millions of pages that you're competing against, right? You're getting thrown into that pool. Now, what does Google do when it looks at that pool of pages? How does it determine who should rank, right? And that's not a simple equation. There's a lot that has to be determined. But what it does, it's going to start to look at a few things. Number one, it's going to look at keyword placement. All right. And so what Google will use is natural language processing. So what Google's going to do, it's going to read through that content and use NLP to understand what that content is about. But it's also going to be looking at some kind of key places on the page to see what is the general topic of this page. Because once it can figure out what the general topic of the page is, it can put it into a different pool, which then now it's in, let's call it in kind of like a secondary pool to determine the rankings. Okay. And this is happening at lightning speed, by the way. This is happening like in real time at such a high rate, it couldn't even fathom how fast this is happening. But just to put it in perspective, this is why it's so critical that you do on-page SEO. Okay. So if you go into a blog post and we'll look at one like this. Okay. And what you want to see is that the primary keyword is popping up in kind of the core location. So you want it, if you go back to the detailed Chrome extension, you can see you want it in the core URL here, right? You want it in the URL, you want it in the title, you want it in the meta description, and then you want it in this H1 as well. So this is the visible heading that pops up on the page. And once again, you go to detail and go to headings, you can see it. You want it in that spot, and then usually a variation in that H2. And then finally, usually in the first sentence, typically. And so sometimes I'll use a variation, sometimes I'll use the exact match. Just depends on what I'm testing at the time, but typically going to be something very, very close to that core keyword. And this is like on-page SEO 101. You have to get the primary keyword in these core spots. And when you look at the Verge article, like I said, it's ranking for a lot of other reasons, but you'll see that that core keyword is popping up where it needs to be. It's in the H1, it's in the title, and it's also actually in the description as well. Okay, and it's probably popping up, and they're getting a little aggressive with this. They actually have 2 H1s, which is kind of funny. But they're hitting that core keyword in all the core spots. All the core spots it's popping up. And what that does is that's going to help Google understand what that page is about. So this is just like SEO 101. You have to get that right before anything else. So that's part one, is place your keywords in the most important spots. And then you have to actually create content around that keyword. And that's when NLP comes in, is basically to understand that block of content, to understand the context, to understand the nuance of that content. And Google's not perfect at this, but it does a pretty good job of understanding content in general. And now that it is using AI more than likely to understand it as well, it's probably happening maybe even better. So that's something to be considered. But you couldn't just place keywords on your page and rank. Like if you only had keywords in your URL and your title and you had one sentence on the page, it likely wouldn't rank. Now, funny thing is, this actually used to work back in, let's say, 2012. You could actually just, create one little thin page, slap the keyword in all the core spots and then throw a video on it. And it actually would rank because you could just slam that page with links. Now, that doesn't work anymore. Google actually can, to a certain extent, scan through content and at least see let's call it minimum viable content on that page. Okay, so you can't rank with no content. That just does not happen. Okay, now let's get into the big boys. These are the big things that really matter, because at a certain point, everyone can do this. Everyone can place a keyword. Everyone can create some content. So what's going to be the difference maker? Well, these are the 3 things that are the difference maker, because not everyone can build on these 3 elements. So the first one is going to be domain level relevance. And by the way, this is not in any specific order. It's just the way that my mind logically works through it. Okay. So domain level relevance, you'll notice that if you look in a lot of local SERPs, you'll see just a lot of exact match type of domains ranking. Okay. This is because it's a very easy signal for Google to determine relevance for an entire domain. It's just the simplest thing. So I'll just give you an example here. If we go and look at St. Louis SEO Consultant, which is one I use in the Academy. I actually built this website from scratch in the Academy just to show people how powerful exact match domains are. But when we look at this, like this is a pure exact match domain. Like it's the purest form, and it's basically 1 or 2 pages. It's a tiny little website. And the reason it ranks, number one, it's highly optimized. Number two, I'm using an exact match domain. And number three, I've driven a lot of backlinks to it. Okay, that's kind of the secret here. It's not super complicated, but this is once again just to show you that exact match domains are really powerful because they're a really easy signal to determine relevance. Without an exact match domain, you have to establish relevance in different ways. Okay, so that's kind of the first part. Now, I'm not saying everyone needs to have an exact match domain. I'm not saying that's the only way to do SEO. I'm just saying it definitely helps. Okay, it just helps. Now, you can over optimize, so that's a different discussion altogether. But let's just begin with, that domain level relevance. Now, if you don't have domain level relevance just by literally just looking at the domain itself, then you have to rely on building relevance through other means. Now, the other means is on the topic level and on the content level. Okay, so most people will look at The Verge and say, well, The Verge is not an expert on printers. Okay, and yeah, you could argue at a broad level, there might be some people that they live and breathe printers and it's all they talk about. Maybe. But what really matters to Google is not necessarily Google's not able to subjectively determine who's an expert. That's just not possible because it's trying to analyze millions and millions of pages at scale using algorithms. So it can't subjectively choose who it wants to be there. But when you start to look at a domain as a whole and whether you can determine that it has some levels of relevance, go ahead and just do a site colon search and then search whatever that core kind of topic is. Now, when we look at The Verge, you could argue they're probably a topic authority on this. I mean, they have written a massive amount of content on printers. I mean, tons. This is not a new topic for them. And so they've written at least, 20, 30, maybe 40 articles, separate pages dedicated to just printers. Okay. So that's, maybe they're not the authority on printers, but they definitely have at least a good baseline of topic authority to be able to compete on this. Now, you can do this with a lot of sites, on Gotcha SEO, or let's just do we'll do Backlinko, okay, who's, has a very powerful website, all right? But if you look, and we look at SEO specifically, look at how many articles are about SEO. Look how many pages are about SEO. It's literally endless. It's absolutely endless. And you have to be able to do this without creating keyword cannibalization, right? So he's just hitting on a lot of different topics. And that helps you build lots and lots of topic authority, helps you cover a lot of ground, but it also helps you build internal links, and it helps spread link equity across the site. So there's just a lot of good reasons to, really focus on one small pocket on your website to build authority in this way. Okay. So that's kind of the next level of this, is that domain level relevance is we're looking at the domain itself, then we're looking at the actual content that they create. The Verge checks all the boxes on that. But now let's talk about originally what my thing here is, the one specifically. I'll go ahead and actually underline this so we can make this clear. The one Google ranking factor that matters more than anything else. So all of these things, like I mentioned, they're all precursors, they're all prerequisites for ranking well. But this right here, okay, this is the one that matters more than anything else. Is domain strength, okay? Domain strength is the most important ranking factor in my honest opinion. And the reason is because if you remove a lot of these things, the only thing that will continue to stand and be able to allow a website that does not have great content perform well is with domain strength. So when I speak in domain strength, I'm talking about the quantity and quality of backlinks that are hitting a single website. And I'm looking at looking at the website as a whole, not just on an individual page level, but the website as a whole. And you can get some kind of rough estimates of what that looks like. You can use Moz's domain authority, or DA. You can use Ahrefs DR, which is domain rating. Or you can use SEMrush's authority score, which they have as well as their own kind of site level authority metric. I also have this built into our rankability tool, which is our own domain score, which is actually on a 1,000 point scale. You can see here, you actually see what this looks like. But basically, you know, from 500 to 1,000, extremely strong. Okay. And then as you go down the ladder. So for what we do when we're trying to determine like if we can actually compete on this, it's really critical because our tool helps you optimize for NLP, like I mentioned earlier. But you know, this is why I've included this in our criteria, because when we look at the rankings, like if you look at these rankability scores, you're going to say, oh, wow, this looks like a great opportunity. None of these pages are super well optimized, but that's extremely deceptive, because if I didn't include this, I would basically be lying and you would make a bad decision. Now, when you look at this, domain score and the overall strength of a site is way more important than any other variable. Like I could optimize for this keyword to the fullest extent. I could get a perfect rankability score. I could hit on all these other methods. But if I have a new website that has virtually no authority, then it's going to be impossible. Okay. And when we're looking at all the domain scores of these sites, we can actually just filter this and see like the majority of those that are ranking in the top 30, like it's extremely competitive, right? And these are some kind of like sketchy websites that don't really count. But when you exclude those, like there's only one page here that's in this kind of like orange range, okay? And we look at this determination, like it's still strong. Like even the weakest site is still really strong. And then everything else is either very strong or extremely strong, okay? So the reason I'm showing you this is because this is the number one ranking factor, all right? And if you see this going into for a keyword, like it's probably not going to be a good investment for you when it comes to SEO. It's probably going to be it's going to be basically the equivalent of flushing money down the toilet. And I want to show you this because I actually posted this on Twitter just to kind of give an example, but I gave this exact example for best CD rates. Okay. And when you look at this particular keyword, I'll go ahead and just show you real quickly. Toss this in here and you'll see this is the reality of what we're up against, okay, for really competitive keywords. So you have Bankrate, you have NerdWallet. All right, those are both extremely powerful websites, but it gets worse because when you look at this, Bankrate actually has 3 listings on the first page. They occupy 3 spots on the first page. And then you have NerdWallet that occupies 2. So that means 50% of the search results go to just 2 domains. Now, how is that possible? Well, it's possible because they're incredibly powerful domains. They can do that. They can get away with that. And the reason you know this is how you can prove that domain strength is the most powerful ranking factor, because no new domain could do this. There's no new website that could go and rank for this keyword and occupy 3 different spots on the first page. It's literally, like, I hate saying the word impossible. I'm not a fan of that, but this is something that is borderline impossible to rank for. Like it is almost impossible. I'd give it like a 0.00001% chance that you could rank for this. And any SEO that would try to rank for this with a new website, best of luck to them, but that would be a really bad idea. And so going through this kind of this rationale, you can see it's not just that you have to narrow this domain level gap, but you also have to narrow that page level gap. But even if you beat the page level gap, it's not going to make a difference. It's not really going to make a dent, because even if let's say you got 300 referring domains going to your new page on a new website, it's still such a massive deficit when it comes to overall domain strength that you probably won't even rank in the top 75. Okay, it's that difficult. And when you look at the math on this, it just doesn't even make sense to do SEO, right? Like you look at the math, like let's say you could get $10 per link, which is like unheard of. That doesn't happen these days at all. And when I talk about like the investment of the link, I'm talking about the resources that go into it. I'm talking about the content has to be created. Like at the end of the day, what is the cost of actually acquiring this link overall as far as time and actual capital? Like you'd have to invest like $1.75 million just to narrow the backlink gap. And even then, you wouldn't even, there's not even a chance that you might actually get an ROI on that. You still may not rank because they're acquiring links at about 1,700 new referring domains every single month. You can see this chart. That's the surplus that they're in. So not only are you having to narrow the gap at such an insane level, you actually have to be acquiring more links than them on a monthly basis just to be able to match the surplus that they have. So truthfully, you'd have to be acquiring, 3, 4, 5,000 referring domains a month just to be able to make a dent. And so this is not to be a Debbie Downer, but I'm just showing you this is the reality of Google at this point. There are just certain keywords that it's just not worth it. It would be a better investment for you to take this 1,700 and just invest it in some sort of different channel that, you could actually quantifiably prove that it's going to get you $2 for every $1 that you put in. You can't really determine that in this scenario. Okay. So just to go back and reiterate on this point, site authority is king. Okay. And when we talk about site authority, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because this is why at the beginning of a campaign, your focus really needs to be on building the overall strength of your website. Don't just start publishing a bunch of content. You need to rewire your mind to think about, okay, we've got a brand new domain here, or we've got a brand new campaign that just doesn't have any link profile. It could actually be a new domain, but just with no link profile. And what you want to do is you want to start to think about how can we build the overall domain strength? Okay, what could we do? Now, the way that I do it personally, and this is for local businesses, for national business, doesn't make a difference. It's pretty formulaic. And the way that I do it is I focus on creating linkable assets. And I create a lot of linkable assets. I'll show you a couple examples. And the goal here is to create a lot of them. They're not all going to capture links. The goal is to create a ton, knowing that about 20% of the pages that you create, these linkable assets, will attract about 80% of the backlinks. Okay, that's just the nature of how this works. But I'll show you an example here. So if we go into and I always like to use good old Brian Dean, because he is really one of the best at creating linkable assets and deploying this type of strategy. But if you look at this, we'll go over here and we'll look at the backlink analytics. They do this, Exploding Topics does this exceptionally well, okay? And hopefully Brian doesn't get mad at me for showing you guys this, but but it's just I'm actually doing it because I just want to show you a good example of how this can be done. And so when we look at this, you'll go ahead and see what they do. There's a kind of formulaic, kind of templated strategy that they use to acquire links at scale, okay? And you can buy links until you're blue in the face, but the problem is you would need an unlimited budget to narrow the gap, and buying links is not scalable. The only thing that's truly scalable when it comes to link acquisition is content. You have to create content to be able to scale link building, okay? Now, when we look at this, you'll see that this is pretty straightforward what they do. They just give a lot of data. It's a lot of data-driven content, okay? This makes a big difference. But on top of it, there's certain businesses in general that are more linkable. So Exploding Topics as a business, being a software business, they tend to attract more links. Now, if you're just a local plumber, you're probably not going to get a lot of links just being a plumber, okay? So SaaS companies have a unique advantage in that way, but there are ways to get links for local businesses, and you need really to focus on creating a lot of data-driven content. So if I was trying to build site authority for a St. Louis plumber, I would be thinking about things like, how many pipes burst in Chesterfield, Missouri every year. Okay. I would start to pick a lot of different data points and start to really associate those data points to the core topic and the location. That's the key. You don't want to just create general, link bait. You want to create stuff that's specific to the topic and specific to the location, but also is variable to that location. For example, I see people that might do something like, best creatine, okay? And let's say they're a supplement company, a local supplement company. They might do something like, creatine statistics. But then that's fine on the national level, but then all of a sudden they try to localize them, best creatine statistics in Chesterfield. And that does not make sense because it's not variable. The creatine is the same whether you live in Missouri or you live in California. So you don't want those types of topics. You want topics that have extreme variability in that one location. Okay. So lots of different ways to do this. So for example, I just rebuilt our entire link building section inside of Gotcha SEO Academy. And so this is a 117 page SOP with tons of different techniques you can use to generate link bait. And this is really, really intense. Okay. This is like super, super intense, but I'll show you like just an example, like, use the like to link method, which is really simple, which is you're just going to run a trusted entity through SEMrush, go to the outbound domains, and then you're just going to look you're going to look at a site that has a lot of links and that is really trusted, and you're going to see what they tend to link out to. Okay, what do they like linking out to? And if you can try to understand what they like linking out to, then it becomes easier, because then you can start to create content that really appeals to these websites that tend to link out to similar assets. Okay, so you're looking for patterns, and then you build out these assets knowing that there is kind of quantifiable proof that they tend to link out. Okay, so that's just one technique, but I actually, rebuilt this whole thing inside of Gotcha SEO Academy. So if you want, you can apply below. I'll have a link. But the point is that this is the type of stuff you need to be thinking about. Is like creating link bait needs to be kind of at the focal point of what you're doing to build site authority. And you can do it on the local level. You can do it on the national level. You don't feel like you're restricted. Like this only applies to like big brands. No, it's totally possible on the local level. And in fact, if you create enough of it, you can start to get links from like local based reporting websites, like local news. A lot of reporters are looking for specific localized data. So you need to show up for that localized data. You need to be the source for them, and you need to put a lot of lines in the ocean. Okay, tons of lines in the ocean. So to wrap it up here, this is one thing that you can do, is really creating this link bait. And the other thing you could do is you can use something like Search Intelligence. Okay, and they do sponsor a lot of my videos, so just so you know, but it's only because I think if you can actually make this investment, it's honestly a good investment. Because if you have the content, if you've already built out the content, then this is one way to start getting those really like high powered backlinks that you really couldn't get otherwise. Okay, so you can look at them, definitely get in touch with them. I think they're a pretty big investment, but overall, this is a way to kind of amplify your link building efforts. And getting one link from like Forbes is the equivalent of getting like thousands of links from little tiny websites. So, these links are not easy to get, but the way to really get them is, kind of leading with content. Now, the thing that they do, it's actually kind of interesting, which I do like, is they do this kind of expert commentary. So as long as you have like a figurehead in your business or some sort of expert, they can actually quote you in a lot of articles, and that will drive links back to your homepage. Okay, so just another really easy way to get links. But of course, you're going to need a budget to work with these guys. They're very, very qualified. They're very good at what they do. So I'll have a link for them also below the video. But the point is that your number one objective, going back to what matters, is build overall domain strength. It is the key not only to ranking, but is the key to maintaining rankings and also being able to weather storms. And this is why when you look at the top websites during these updates, they don't really move. Okay, when we look at them, they don't really move. And we look at the organic research of one like this, like Exploding Topics, which is incredibly authoritative. Look at all these different updates that happen. Like nothing happens to them. Why? Why does nothing happen to them? Well, their content's good. Yes, their content is definitely good. It's definitely great. But they have a massive amount of domain strength. They can weather the storms. Google has turned the dial on backlinks once again. And it just seems like, I've been doing this now since 2011. I've been doing SEO since 2011, every single day since 2011. And I can tell you, you would think that by now Google would be able to remove itself from just using backlinks as the core ranking variable. But to this day, it is still the thing that makes the difference, because they just haven't figured out a way to ultimately get away from it. Yes, they're using user signals. Yes, they're tracking everything we're doing on Google Chrome and across other platforms and other products. Absolutely. But when it comes down to it, when you look at the SERPs, you see what's ranking. You look at the domain score of the top. Like when you scan the results and you see that it's almost all authority sites that are ranking, it's pretty clear that's one of the most important ranking variables. Okay, so that's it. Start building your website authority and really start to build that at the beginning. And then once you start to build up some traction, you start to get some links, then now we start to build out a lot more keyword driven content, which now it will rank a lot easier. That's another thing to think about too, is like The Verge didn't need links going to this new page. Think about that. They were able to rank, very easily without needing links going to the specific page. That's all because of overall domain strength. So hope that helps. And if you like this video, please like it, and always please subscribe. I'll be publishing a lot more SEO videos. And if you're interested in rankability, by the way, we're going to be having a free trial option here coming up soon. So I'll have a link below the video.